rename. I get it. Oh.
All right. Well, for those of you joining in, wherever you may be or watching this tomorrow, we are a bunch of doctors talking about education. Hello, John Wick. John Wick.
Also has a cool shirt on. Also has I'm already feeling left out.
Here we go. Here we go.
Welcome.
King. Okay. All right.
And Alana King is in the house.
Okay,
Another Canadian.
awesome.
There we go. Now we're happening. We just had to figure this out. This is all new to us.
So we're recording and we're live on YouTube just to make sure you've given consent.
Or else log out. Right now.
Oh, here comes Anders. Oh, this is wonderful. Oh, how great. Good to see you, Anders.
This is becoming a competition. Alana, we need more troops.
This is wonderful. Hello. We're just.
Is that right?
Started.
Yep.
Hi. Anders from northern Sweden here. Yeah.
Excellent. Northern Sweden.
Thanks for
Canada?
joining.
Yes. So, hi, Brian.
Hi there.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah, so this is let's just kick it right off. With 5 of us in the room, we might as well start rethinking everything that needs
Sounds
rethinking in education.
Okay, I will put is it in there? Do I have to put the Google Doc in again? Let's just start talking and introduce each other, but
Right.
yeah. Oh, you're Brian?
And here comes Todd. So I'm Brian, Dr. Brian, newly crowned. So it's very exciting. And I just put out there on the web my ideas about how we should think together and collaborate and really lead the way, championing what we already know. We're here in this meeting room because we pretty much agree, or mostly agree, or 100% agree that ed tech is, has so much power to be used in a new way, and it's been that way for many years. And all of a sudden, we have foisted upon us this need to really pivot and rethink the relationship to teaching and learning using this technology. So that's what I started putting out there, and then I met Dr. Roberts from Canada. And so why don't you introduce yourself, since we are the troublemakers starting this revolution.
We are the lead troublemakers to be positive and think about all the amazing things that are coming out of transitioning and pivoting into online and alternative learning environments. I'm based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I see some fellow colleagues in here, which is really exciting. Fellow troublemakers, I would say, in their own way. And I'll leave it at that. Go ahead. Who else is here?
Yeah. Should I continue? Perhaps Anders Norberg from Skellefteå, a town in northern Sweden that does not have a university of its own, but I'm the caretaker of a multi-institutional campus in our town here, and I also work with a European education development projects, and I'm kind of concentrated on being a troublemaker concerning access to education and questioning a lot of traditional ways of looking at things, and I'm looking for solutions beyond an artificial distinction between campus and distance learning, for example, and so on. And right now I'm researching adaptive learning, and I'm developing a European education about batteries and electromobility. That's what I'm doing right now.
That's great. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. So.
All right. So I'll go next. My name's John Wick, kind of like the movie and all that fame that's out there, but that's not me. I'm Dr. John Wick, currently a middle school science teacher, former principal, adjunct professor. My specialty has always been in educational technology and kind of shaking up the system. So I met Brian when I was finishing up my doctoral program, and he was nearing the end of his. So it was really nice to actually connect, and I'm happy to be here and just kind of share thoughts on everything that's happening.
Thanks for coming. Anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Sure, I'll go quickly. Hopefully my internet's working all right. Todd Kiernan, Crossfield, Alberta, just north of Calgary. Verena, hi, good to see you. 15 years in online, 18 years in administration, and I was doing off-campus education till about 3 weeks ago, and they stopped it all. So I phoned my old boss in central office, and I'm just trying to help out with learning specialists and the creation of whatever we're going to create in the next little while.
Right. Thanks for coming.
I'm Alana King, and I'm in rural Ontario. I'm a secondary school educator, and Verena and I met because we met in Calgary at the Calgary Science School because we were both interested in, I think at that time, alternative sort of viewpoints on education and technology as well. And like many of you, I've taught about 12 years online. I teach English and I like the fine arts. And I'm currently trying to make my way back after a medical leave this year, but all of this foolishness about not being able to collaborate made me sort of invite myself to the conversation, didn't I, Brian?
That was a good move. I'm glad you did.
Thanks.
I can go up next. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. So yeah, I'm Barb Brown, and I also know Verena. I'm at the University of Calgary, was previously working in a couple of school districts in Alberta as educational technology supervisor. And yeah, have been interested in ed tech my whole teaching career, both in K-12 and in higher ed. And currently, doing a lot of online teaching, supporting other instructors that are teaching online, and also supporting school districts that are transitioning to teaching online, in this time of pivoting to online. Mm-hmm. And I'm really hopeful that perhaps the silver lining will be that, we will reconsider some of the current structures in our schools and perhaps make some changes for the future.
Great. So let me kick things off a little bit here. So nice to have all of you, and this is cool. My first attempt at trying to think about what teachers and students might do was to just go live, however uncomfortable it could be. I think there's something really nice about just figuring things out together, like we're doing here. Started with an initial thread or a prompt or an objective, and then see how it develops. And of course, they could get tricky depending on the age group, how one might do that. But I just wanted to get your initial thoughts about how do you approach just being in the moment on the internet, collaborating, teachers and students? Do you see that as something that you would personally do, and what sort of challenges or problems or benefits do you see from doing something like that?
I was listening to an old TED Talk by Nina Simon, who is a museum curator in Santa Cruz, California. Does anybody else know that name? Nina Simon? Anyway, so Nina is one of my, gurus, because she talks about inviting people through the door. She's talking physically about the museum, but I think about that way, same as the portal in e-learning. And so I think one of the things about going live is to make that as simple and as welcoming as possible and as barrier free for everybody. So those are my biggest concerns right now. Because just for example, our school board in Ontario hasn't decided yet if we can do video conferencing with students yet. I mean, we can do it, but they want to green light it. You know, they want to put it through some parameters and vet it. And so that's kind of a tricky portal in terms of the liveness of it.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I'm doing middle school right now, and definitely our preschool kids all the way up through middle school. You know, the different developmental stages really are kind of either barriers to how live you can be, because, you know, if you have a kindergartner or a first grader, it takes a lot of parents hands-on with them who may be needing to work at this time and aren't there to do that. Whereas in middle school, they're a little bit more able to do the live things on their own. What I've really been concerned about, I do like live. I think it's important to have that touch base and make it available. But in times like this, where we don't know what the home situation is or what's going on in their lives, my goal is always to make it as accessible as possible. So my live sessions are recorded, and I can put them up, and people can interact that way, so that really we take advantage of the live session, but also it's there for those who have to do it asynchronously and can really try and make the best use of the technology for the lessons that are going on.
I think I'd add to that too, just based on like open readiness or readiness to share. I think that's really important as well to consider. And a lot of people are going through trauma as it is. Literally putting them into a synchronous environment. So that's when I start thinking about other synchronous environments like gaming or I don't know, like that's maybe what we can talk about a bit, other places where they feel safe. And I think that's what you're getting at a bit too there, John. It's not necessarily about the face-to-face in a video conference capacity. It's the interactions, engagement, and collaboration, and how they build and work with each other, and how we can connect in my world, like the informal and the formal learning spaces. And right now in this moment, I've noticed the parents as well. As a parent myself and an online educator, I have never felt so much need to be involved. And I am seeing the pushback on that, which is really interesting from the teachers as well. So that's another area that I like, who's interacting, who's collaborating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Anders here, yes, I think that we have to think about the mix between being synchronous, for example, in a video conference or a classrooms a long time ago now, and I saw the shifts between being synchronous and being asynchronous for everybody, and preparing for next session of synchronicities. So what to say, this shift between modalities in a long process, just letting a synchronous session introduce things, organize things, add some problems to work with and some assignments, etc., and have a deadline at the next synchronous session, etc. I think if we do too much asynchronous, we are not gaining anything in a comparison with conventional classroom settings, etc. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think the part of what prompted me to go straight to, do it live as a guiding principle, and I think that's a great idea to be inside of a game live, or be inside of a collaborative document live. It doesn't have to be video conferencing. And But I think the thing that got me there was I was very concerned about just, passing back and forth paper, digital worksheets, downloading assignments from, pre-existing places. And so like I started to really look back at like, well, what do I love about the internet? It's not that I can download a bunch of stuff and hand it out that someone else made. And so I'm seeing an uptick in people looking to the internet as a place to just download and disseminate. And that concerns me. It always concerns me, but now I think that we're in this place of scrambling for what to do. I'd like to try to find ways to encourage and brainstorm, ways that we know are healthy behaviors for teaching and learning that do not just rely on someone else's predetermined outcomes, on a worksheet or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think you hit on it really big there. There's a lot of resources out there that people will just download and put up and say, good luck, here it is. And that's always been kind of one of my pet peeves. But I found, at least with this shift for me, it's been really putting a lot more, onus on me to be a curator of what's out there. So, I may have a video that I'm having the students watch, but I've probably watched about 25 videos to find the one that actually gets to the core of what I want them to be able to do. And then, and I think this is where a lot of teachers are getting stuck right now, is putting up a video, and I get it, we're stressed. This is, a very difficult time, but going beyond that and saying, okay, well, what can we do with this? How would I do this in a normal classroom? What's the artifact that you're going to produce that I can assess? Did you learn this, or how am I going to bring you forward? And I think for me, that's been the biggest shift, is, not necessarily being the one in the classroom in front of them, but doing that, finding the stuff, creating the lessons that build off of that resource. And then really, like once a day, I have an hour where the students can meet with me and ask questions about it. And I'll go onto like Ziteboard and I'll start doing, like a digital whiteboard so I can explain things to them. So it's been a lot more difficult, but I am happy to see that we're able to actually start going in these directions. And I hope, and I think it will happen. I think teachers are just, they're getting their foundation right now, but as soon as they get that foundation, they're going to start really taking ownership of what's out there and how they present it for their lessons.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things I'm really worried about is that that kids will have too many things to do and that teachers are providing too much for them. So, we have teachers that are expecting students to be in live sessions and to be present during that time. And then on top of that, I know in my home, my daughter's also required to be present and online during her dance classes. So now not only is she, required to do the schoolwork that the teachers are providing, but, the time frame that she would normally be at dance after school, sometimes for a couple hours, she's now online and doing the dance. Piano teacher is doing the same thing. So I wonder if, if we're going to, overconsume our kids in too much screen time. And perhaps, we need to consider the times when we are meeting live to make sure it's really purposeful and that, that it's not for extended periods of time. So John, I like your, kind of 1 hour where the kids would drop in. But anyway, that's one of the things I've been thinking about is that, I think it's nice that we can meet online like this, but what happens if everyone does that with our kids and with all the different activities?
Right. And that's the thing. And I have seen, and I think this gets to what, Brian was bringing up, this whole topic of pivoting, this need to have that where everyone's there at the same time, everyone's watching no matter what. It's kind of, it's holding on to how things have been done. That pivot hasn't happened there yet, where we're saying, no, you could be in my live session. That's great if you are, get what you need out of it. But even today, I had kids in my session. They came in and asked a question. I said, okay, well, do you need anything else? Or no, I'm like, okay, go do what you got to do. You do not need to be here. I'm going to see the product that you come out with at the end of this, and I'm going to help you through it. But definitely this is not the time to say you have to be here, because we just don't know what's happening at home, and we can't, just like with homework, which is another hot button for me, we don't know what's happening there. So we have to just do our best with what we have, but not hold on to the old paradigms that have kept us so much like in our ivory towers doling out knowledge.
Right. I think the thing that comes up next for me is how much are we encouraging choice and student voice and student inquiry and passions and interests that they have. I mean, not to mention their own fears and anxieties. I mean, obviously everyone's just, in a whole new reality here. But to insist upon a curriculum that the textbook says we're on chapter 5 or 9 because it's April 1st tomorrow. Like, are you crazy? Like, that is not at all relevant or useful, and it probably never was. And it's really being highlighted as being absurd where we are now. And so I want to get your thoughts on that. Like, how are we encouraging students to lead the way? And Verena, you were saying when we were speaking earlier this week, talking about the idea of co-designing the curriculum with students.
Well, I mentioned that to my own kids because Brian and I were trying to figure out what we would do. Like, how do we engage everyone in pivoting and learning in new environments? So I have 2 teens and a 9-year-old or 10-year-old, actually. I don't even know the ages of my kids anymore. And so I asked the teens, would they consider creating like a TikTok videos about their perspectives of how we're teaching? Like, what does learning look like for them right now? Like, make some jokes about it. Just tell us what you think. I know there are some memes, but they're mostly about moms and things going on at home, which is okay. But I'm also okay with taking the brunt of the jokes and taking some of the humor and talking, because I think that we can get a lot of insight into how things are going at home and what's going on in a very safe and not, well, that could be unsafe as well. So I'm both lines on that. Like, I want to be careful, but I asked them if they would do that, and they thought it was hilarious. They're like, yeah, of course we want to tell you our crazy teachers who are trying this and jumping into our spaces and doing stuff. So that's what we were talking about as well. Like, what kind of spaces should we be going into and thinking about getting information and trying to support and be more responsive to our student needs? I guess that was where we were going with that.
So I was walking through the park the other night about 10:30, and when you think you're walking through the park at 10:30, I expected to be alone, but of course the usual suspects were there. The people who weren't social distancing were hotboxing in a car, right? So, and I live where I teach, so I don't want to be in the hotbox car with them. I don't even really want to say, hey, was that Eminem you were listening to the other night? Like, I just want to stay right out of it. And so part of me is to clearly define those spaces. I just had a kid openly message me on Twitter saying, hey, Mrs. King, I think I might have some time to finish that assignment up. Could I submit it to you still? And I said, sure, buddy, can we talk about it in Google Classroom? So I think there's got to be some social media distancing too, right? Like, we have to sort of tell them, here's where the box is. I don't have to be everywhere. Go ahead, Anders. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a part of the problem with information and communication nowadays. It's so liquid and so thin that it leaks always through classrooms, doors, and traditional categorizations between private and public and everything, really. And that's not complex only for pupils. It's for us as well. And that has really also made the traditional classroom into another thing, because information is leaking in and out all the time. So the classroom doesn't work as originally intended even.
Right. Yeah. The idea that the teacher in the room is the only one who can answer the question, right? For years we've been moving away from that. Of course, granted, I've been, and I'm sure you have as well, been in many classrooms where you really only want to ask the teacher because the teacher's really an expert and this is your moment to get your questions answered, right? So there, like that was the other thing I would to flip around even the idea of student choice, and is to look at how this idea, this connectivity maybe is a way to highlight that expert professor or teacher in a particular subject, and just flatten all the paywalls and spread this amazing classroom experience to millions of people. And like there's so much great content locked up behind Patreon and what's that other big course, not Coursera, but there's another one, but anyway, you know what I mean. So just turning that around too, like I get how, so I like that idea, social media distancing. I have not considered that phrase before. That's a good one.
Yes, I was once surveying students at a teacher education here, and so on, and I found that these young students that wanted to become teachers, they almost all loved school. I didn't think of that, and many of them wanted to be some kind of stand-up heroes in the classroom, etc. They wanted that kind of attention from younger people and so on, and that made me think: are we recruiting the right kind of teachers for our age, really, or are we recruiting those who want personal attention and want all knowledge to come from them, and in some way being physically transferred in the classroom, etc. If they are going to work 20, 30, 40 years more, etc. That's a frightening thought. So.
I was thinking about what you were saying, John. This morning, we're on our third week of, I don't know, isolation, social distancing, whatever we're doing here in Calgary. And our teachers were on spring break, and so they're coming back this week, so they're preparing. So we haven't been given a lot of guidance as parents, and so we're going into the third week on this. So I caved and became the teacher to my children today due to structure more than anything, because I think that I kind of forgot about the need for structure and that developmental aspect, and they were going crazy, and it was my way of trying to give everyone a little bit of control. So my immediate biology / science grade 8 task, because they were working on cells, was to just look up animal and plant cells and said, okay, well, this is a video, but I chose one where they were drawing it. And so then my son had to draw it and then label everything. And then, but I really appreciate your point, John, because he did it and he was like, this is so awesome. This is so much fun. And I'm thinking, this is no different than a worksheet that is an animal plant cell in my head. Like I thought that. But my intention is that then we're going to learn about all the different pieces and parts of the cell, and then we're going to create a whole city and to learn about how things work together. But I had to think about the learning design behind it. Like, where was I going to go with this plant and animal cell before I even started? And yeah, I have some basic science background, so I could figure that out and go. But how are teachers able to do that right now? Like, even in the moment, like think about that kind of learning design ahead of time, or are they doing things in the moment, like day by day? I'm wondering about what your thoughts are on that, because he was really excited just to draw. I thought it was really fascinating, although my 10-year-old told him he was plagiarizing, and I was like, I don't know where you got that from.
Yeah, so just from what I've seen out there right now, I think it's a mix at the moment, because there are so many who, you know, I have the benefit of having been a technology coach basically for 10 years. So my job was to teach teachers the PD on, this is how you use these tools, this is how you make things a little easier for your life. But you know, there are teachers out there who have just been like, well, I don't really need to. So they've just done it the way they always have. And now they find themselves thrust into, they need to. And so, you know, like me, I'm answering tons of questions like never before, which is great. But I see those types of teachers, they're more in the moment. Like, how do I just get this worksheet out there? They could print it, they could turn it into me. What's the process for that? The ones who are a little bit, you know, further down the road, I think that's where the basic skills we have as educators come in, for let's backwards design this. What's the product? And then after you know what your end design is, then start looking, or at least this is how I'm doing it. I'm looking, okay, well, what's out there that allows me to do this? Is this best done by a Google Doc that I can have them do an essay in? Or is this best done through, you know, Flipgrid, where I have actual student responses and they engage each other? So that for me is the most exciting part, is, you know, I choose what and getting back to what Brian said, I would love it if they were helping me choose that, but I think they're also in panic mode too at the moment. So at the moment, I'm choosing those products. Hopefully, as we go down the road further, they can be involved in that process. But that allows me to select the best tools to help that product come to my computer screen for assessment.
We had our first staff meeting yesterday, and our staff meeting, we were talking about how it's not really like e-learning, because we're responding to the crisis, we're responding to the emergency. And e-learning, you know, if it was structured that way, let's say from the beginning of the semester, the beginning of the year, it would have been structured completely differently. So for me, my biggest concerns, and I'm teaching creative writing grade 12 right now with a blend of kids in it, is how do I try to maintain the beautiful peer group mentality that we had before we went on March break, and that community, which I think is really the reason that we do face-to-face school, especially because they really need to know it's going to be okay right now, and to know who's in their neighborhood. And at the same time, do I have to teach them poetry and drama and short storytelling in that way? Because we also, you know, between the ice storms of February and this, we haven't actually had that much time together. Like, we were kind of just getting ready to leap into the inquiry-based, as you said, Brian, nature of, okay, writing and peer grouping and that sort of stuff. So we haven't actually been through the whole process yet once together. So those are my worries, is how am I going to be able to do asynchronous peer group work for kids that don't have an experience in online learning yet? And I'm making a funny face. That's how I feel about that. This is my emoji face.
Those are great. That's you have an amazing challenge ahead of you there. That sounds,
yeah.
It sounds frightening and fun. You know, the thing that as you were talking, I was trying to picture that, and the only thing I could think of is what to do, and is just pull back all of the set design and show how you build a set design. Like, you know, like that's really, I mean, so that's, to me, that's all really we have left to do, and how we can really instruct and educate is to show students just the power of our minds, and how we can, you know, how we can think out loud, and draw together ideas and harvest ideas, the curate, right, as John is talking about, But how do you even come up with that? Like, so the 25 videos, John, that you watched to finally find this one video, if that process were done with students, then, you know, obviously you would have gone somewhere else with it in the end, but that process would have been instructive itself, and allowed you to collaborate with them, right, in figuring out, well, which one hit right, or which one, or which small group, which subset of your students, you know, gravitated towards a particular one, you know. So anyway, this, like, so those kinds of things is what that's what comes to mind as our probably our strongest tool right now, is to, that's where I go with, well, let's be live, like, and maybe it's not for hours, but maybe it's you know, in short bursts to think together, and let's see where that goes.
Alana, I just have been working with adults, not teenagers, and not little people, adults, grad students, and Barb was part of this process as well. So I'm cheating a little bit because she's here to help too. I would say she can chip in. We had to rethink the whole idea of group work from an inquiry-based perspective for two reasons. One, we were online and it was really tricky and it wasn't working well. But two, the asynchronous, synchronous nature that we're talking about. And three, people didn't want to do group work. They wanted to do their individual work, but they wanted to work in groups, like you're saying, Brian. So they wanted to connect, but they didn't want to have that responsibility or that accountability. So we split it up over like 12 weeks, and we created a model saying the first week, teacher directed, totally. I'm going to be that provocateur, that instigator. The second week, we asked them to choose their groups. And we said, please choose people that you trust. Please choose people that are going to be really deep and meaningful. And ironically, it's so important now in this transition that, you know, we said things like that because they're very tight groups. And then in the third week, take your ideas and share them with someone outside that group. And then we went right back to the beginning. So then it became whatever topic we were going back to, or next little spot that we'd move up on. Okay, teacher's going to come in direct, be really focused, but you know, next week you can go to your peer group and complain about her, and you can say how horrible she is and how she's pushing you and challenging you, but you have that support network, and then push away. And then all we did was kind of a cyclical design. It's very design thinking prototype, very, yeah, but it has worked really successfully because now they see themselves as groups, but they're not groups, and they've created individual learning pathways and their own projects. But the other thing that I was thinking, to digress off of that, that's just a way you could think about that, Alana, is you're all talking about the development of digital literacies. Like, how do we support the students? Like, my son said to me, oh, Mom, your video is way better than my video. And I'm like, you don't even know how to find a video. Like, that's why. So how can we encourage our students to think about learning those skills? Otherwise they become dependent on us again. Like, we have to push that off of us. What are you doing in those kind of ways?
Well, I'm having completely polar responses to, I think, the digital literacy thing. One of them is, you know, again, I know them just well enough, maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks enough to have done some of the group exercises that you've said. And so in a sense, that's one kind of literacy, right? But now we're going to take that. I'm thinking also what I said about the hotboxing, and wondering if maybe the social media, I let them do it. Maybe I don't physically need to be there for that. You guys can use your TikTok or whatever it is to talk to each other, but figure out how you're going to do it. But within that, I have one student that contacted me already and said, I don't even think I have a camera at home. So how am I going to do a speech? And I said, I didn't say, don't you have a phone? Because that would be the unusual piece. Low bandwidth here, I expect that. I expect that everybody's going to be struggling with that. But some way to reach out, especially since all the public libraries are closed, I would expect that that's going to be interesting. So the very least I could do is set up sort of common Google Docs for each peer group and then say kind of work it out. And I do think that they know each other. But the other thing, I even had a kid write to me and say, look, I've got a green screen and a podcasting studio at home. I don't want to push I don't want to step on any toes, but would it be okay if I use that? And I was like, go ahead, but it's funny that in a sense that needed to be asked. I guess the impetus is what I'm thinking. What have I said to make her feel afraid to use all the things that she's got at hand? So I don't have an answer, but I have a couple of examples.
Yeah, I think what you're getting there at Alana was really interesting. I don't think you said anything that made her feel that she couldn't do that. I think it's, this is your high school, right? So this is 10 plus years of how school works. And that's what has given her that, oh, it might not be okay if I use this. So not so much you, but I just think the way the system has been for these kids since they've entered it, even since I entered it, probably since you entered it and everyone else, it's been geared to be like, oh, well, if I do this, I really don't have permission. I need to ask. And I like that you brought up, there are some kids without a camera, like the whole digital equity thing is massive. And for teachers, we need to be even more flexible than we are on a daily basis, because, I do have a student who says, I don't have internet at home. Like, we're worried about where our next meal is coming from. Yeah, guess what? I'm going to do their assignment totally differently, but I'm still going to assess the knowledge and I still have to find a way to reach them. That's more work on my part, but my job title is teacher. It's not, grader.
Exactly.
So that's where we need to be.
Sean, how are you going to get around the question, I guess, of that and say, so, how many of you have a camera at home? I don't want to ask everybody, but I think I'm getting to the point where I kind of need to know.
Yeah. So basically what I've done is I kind of put out there, hey, these are the basic tools that I'm going to be using. Like, just, I let them all know. Is there anything on here that you think you might have an issue with? And even if you don't anticipate having an issue, if one comes up, you have your friends, talk to them. And this has already happened. I've had someone come to me and say, hey, Johnny's internet is out at his house for the past 2 days. He can't tell you, I'm telling you. So again, those connections that are so important have to be there for those types of things to happen. And then of course, Johnny comes back and I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. Get 2 extra days, just work on it. Don't stress. This is not the time to stress. I'm more concerned about you actually learning the material.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, in my daughter's school, they sent out a survey to us asking us, what type of technology we had at home and if there were any additional supports that they could provide. And what they did is they then shared with the whole school community in email, just indicated and said, out of 340 families, 330 replied. And so, the 10 families that didn't reply, they would be contacting them by phone to figure out what they might need. And then as a second step, what they did is they started to sign out equipment from the school to families that need them. So I'm sure that's happening at other schools as well. But I thought, that's great to make sure that that everyone has access, because even in some homes, you might have a computer, but if you have several children at home, then you're all sharing the one computer. Or like for me, my computer crashed this morning. So now I'm on a different device. Luckily, I have a different device to be on, but we're going to have those instances where kids don't have access or lose access or have to share access with others in their home. So I think we do need to really differentiate how we're designing for them and what our expectations might be. And, it might be a quick phone call with the student where they describe their learning to you, rather than submitting something in written format or in digital format.
Lots of great ideas. I'm curious if we might want to wrap up for today soon, just so that I'm sure everyone has many things to do and many more things to do. But we're going to keep coming back to this. If you want to join in again, I think we're going to run another one in 2 days, same time, and then maybe start coming up with a regular weekly time. And if this gets a really busy room. Maybe we'll run more, like 2 or 3 a week. Who knows? But so a couple things that maybe to think about for all of us and for anyone who happens to stumble upon this video is what to go to next. I'd say that we should still address assessment, and there's a lot of concern about, and it came up today, like do you complete the already set in stone plans for the year? Do you pivot also from those things, not just pivoting to how we do school? And so I'd like to investigate that further. Like, what are some of your thoughts? And then just for those of you who are here in the room, or anyone else again watching, we were thinking, Dr. Roberts and I were thinking that we would maybe run some interviews, some short interviews, again, taped or live also, 10-15 minutes with each of you, just to kind of pick your brains individually, separate from the group think, and see where that goes, and just to keep putting out thoughtful content with smart people is the goal here.
Well said, Brian. So on that note, I guess we can finish up, and Brian and I will probably be connecting with you. But if you have other friends and colleagues who you think others could really benefit from listening to their ideas or hearing their ideas, please do not hesitate to DM us and send us, Twitter, whatever, just get a hold of us. And we will surely track those people down and see if they'll give us 10 minutes of their time. And we're going to start collecting things together and think about next steps. Just today is our first start, though. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see you out
Thank you.
there on the internet.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
All right. Adios.
Bye.
Bye-bye and cut.
Bye.